I was pouring tea for my wife, when my son shouted from the hallway, "You owe me!" At first I thought he was joking. He'd never spoken to me like that in 52 years. Then he stepped closer and said, "I need $100,000. Today." My wife looked at me, confused, whispering, "Why is he talking like this?" I didn't know, but the next morning, I learned exactly why. When he said it the second time, his voice wasn't raised, but it had that edge I'd only heard once. When he was 17 and came home after wrecking his first car. Back then, it was fear talking. This time, it felt like something else entirely. I set the teapot down and asked him what was going on. He didn't answer right away. He looked at my wife instead, almost as if he didn't want her hearing any of it. My wife, Elaine, tried to soothe him the way she always had. She said, "Sweetheart, talk to us. We can't help if we don't understand." But he wouldn't even look at her. He kept staring at me, hands shaking slightly. "Dad, just give me the money. Please, don't make this harder." I told him we didn't have that kind of money sitting around. We never had. We lived simply. Saved what we could, stretched things to help him through college, helped with the down payment for his first home. He knew our situation. He knew every detail. So hearing him talk like that, it didn't make sense. He said, "Stop pretending." Those were his exact words. "Stop pretending you don't have it." I kept my voice steady, because I could feel my wife's hand inching toward mine under the table. She was worried. I didn't want to make it worse. I asked him why he thought I had $100,000. That number wasn't random. It meant something to him. He took a breath, then another, and said, "Because Mom told me." Elaine blinked at him. "Told you what?" Her voice was already trembling. He turned toward her, and he looked almost disappointed, like he wanted her to back him up, and she wasn't doing it. "You told me last month," he said. "You said Dad was hiding money. You said he didn't trust me." Elaine shook her head immediately. "I never said that. Why would I say that?" She looked at me next, her eyes searching mine as if hoping I could make sense of it. But I was just as lost. My son rubbed his forehead and muttered, "You don't even remember. Unbelievable." He started pacing then. Short steps back and forth, back and forth. That was an old habit too. He did it when he was overwhelmed. I told him we needed to slow down, sit, talk properly. He refused. He said, "You've lied to me my whole life. Both of you." When he said that, something inside me dropped. I'd never lied to him about anything that mattered. Not once, I asked him to explain. He said, "Grandpa's money, the inheritance. The part you kept." That hit me so hard, I couldn't speak for a moment. My father had died 20 years ago. There was no inheritance. My father hadn't had anything to leave behind except a few personal items and memories. My son knew that. We'd talked about it many times. But so hearing him say it, like it was definite, absolute, it frightened me. I said there was no inheritance. "You know that." He shook his head. "Mom said there was." Elaine kept insisting she'd never said anything like that. But I could see the pain in her eyes. She felt accused of something she couldn't even understand. I stepped toward him, trying to calm things down, but he backed away like I was coming to attack him, which hurt more than anything else. He said, "Don't fake concern. I know what you're like." That was the moment I realized. Something was terribly wrong, not just with the situation, but with him. Not anger wrong. Something deeper. Something he wasn't telling us. I asked him what had happened. Who had told him these things? Why he believed them. He refused to say. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Before he walked out, he said, "You have until tomorrow morning. If you don't give me the money, I'll do what I have to do." My wife started crying, right after the door closed. Not loud, but the kind of quiet crying she does when she's trying not to make things harder. She asked me if I believed her, and I told her of course I did. She looked relieved for just a second. then scared again. Why would he say something like that? She whispered. I didn't know, but I told her we'd figure it out. She asked me if I thought he'd hurt himself. That thought hadn't even occurred to me until she said it. Then it hit me like a hammer. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I texted him. Nothing. Hours went by. My wife kept checking the window as if he might walk back in. I sat at the kitchen table, going over old conversations in my head, trying to find anything that might explain why our son thought I was hiding money. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Finally, I opened it, expecting a reply from him. But it wasn't him. It was a number I didn't recognize. The message said, "He's telling the truth. You've kept secrets long enough." That was it. No name, no context. Just that sentence. I showed it to my wife. She stared at the phone, then at me. Who would text something like that? She asked me if I recognized the number. I didn't. I called it. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. The voicemail was empty. No name recorded. The voicemail was empty. No name recorded. My wife said we should call the police. But I didn't know what we'd even tell them. That our son demanded money, and someone texted me from a number we didn't know. We barely slept that night. My wife kept asking if she'd forgotten something. If she'd said something she didn't remember saying. She's been struggling with little memory slips lately. Harmless ones, but hearing our son accuse her of telling him something she couldn't recall, it shook her badly. She kept blaming herself, but I told her not to. Something else was going on. Something bigger. Then morning came, and with it, the answer I wasn't prepared for. It arrived at 7:13 a.m., a knock at the door. A man I'd never seen before was standing there holding a sealed envelope with my full name written on it in handwriting I hadn't seen in 20 years. My father's handwriting. The man didn't say who he was. He just held the envelope out and said, "This was passed down with instructions. I was asked to deliver it today." His voice was steady, not warm, not cold, just factual. I asked him who gave it to him. He said, "I can't disclose that," and before I could ask anything else, he turned and walked away. No explanation, no introduction, no reason for any of it. My wife stood behind me, her hands twisting the ends of her sleeves the way she always did when she was nervous. She asked me what was inside. I told her I didn't know. My own name, written the exact same way my father used to sign birthday cards, that tone in the letters, those heavy downstrokes at the start of each word. It didn't make sense. He'd been gone for 2 decades. There was no way this envelope could exist, unless someone had kept it all these years. I opened it at the kitchen table. My wife hovered next to me. Waiting, inside was a single sheet of paper. Folded twice, the paper felt old. Not visibly dirty or worn, just old. The handwriting inside was definitely his. I knew every shape of those letters. I'd seen them my whole life. But the message wasn't long. It was a single sentence. "If he ever asks, tell him the truth." My wife leaned closer. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer because I didn't know how to. I read the sentence again, slower this time. It didn't say what truth. It didn't even specify who he was. But I knew. We both knew. It was about our son. This was about him, asking for the money, asking for the truth, about some inheritance that didn't exist. My wife whispered, "Is this real?" I told her I didn't know. My mind was racing. Was someone forging my father's handwriting? And if they were, why go through that trouble? And who knew enough about my father's handwriting to copy it perfectly? My wife asked me to sit down because she could see my hands shaking. I didn't even realize they were. She said, "Maybe your dad left something you didn't know about." I told her that wasn't possible. My father hadn't had anything. He lived modestly. He died modestly. He died modestly. He wasn't a secret-keeping kind of man. He was straightforward to the point of bluntness. But the timing, that was what shook me. The knock came the very morning our son had given us his ultimatum. The same morning he expected $100,000. The same morning after that mysterious text told me I'd kept secrets long enough. None of this could be a coincidence. Not when everything was happening at once. My wife said, "Maybe we should call him. Maybe he'll calm down if he sees this letter." I wasn't sure, but I tried anyway. I dialed his number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again, same thing. My wife asked if we should drive to his house. I hesitated. If he was angry enough to accuse us of hiding things, showing up unannounced might make it worse. But sitting still was worse. We got in the car. My wife kept asking if I was okay. Truth was, I wasn't. My father's handwriting kept flashing in my head. That one sentence. The firmness of his tone even in death. Tell him the truth. I'd never kept anything from my son. I raised him with honesty. Sometimes too much honesty. So why would my father write something like that? When we reached my son's house, his car was gone. My wife knocked. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I didn't like the silence. Not after the way he'd acted the day before. Not after the message. Not after the envelope. My wife suggested calling his wife, but that was its own complication. They'd separated 8 months ago, quietly, painfully. We stayed out of it, because he asked us to. But now I wished we hadn't listened. I finally decided to send him a text. "Please come home. We need to talk. We got something this morning." I didn't mention the letter. Not yet. I didn't want to scare him off, or escalate anything. He didn't respond. We waited in the car for a while. My wife kept saying she felt guilty, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. She kept worrying she'd forgotten something. She said that maybe she'd casually mentioned something she shouldn't have. She'd been having trouble with small things, names, dates where she'd put her glasses, but nothing serious. Nothing like inventing whole stories that didn't exist. I told her it wasn't her fault. She looked at me and said, "Then why would he say it was me?" I didn't have an answer for that. After sitting there too long, we drove home. I checked my phone constantly. Nothing. Not from him. Not from him. Not from the unknown number. My wife kept asking about the letter. I told her there had to be an explanation, but I didn't know what it was yet. She asked me if my father had ever pulled me aside before he died, told me something in private. I said no. He wasn't that kind of man. Everything he needed to say, he said plainly. Around noon, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it immediately. It wasn't my son. It was the same unknown number from the night before. A new message. Did he come? Those 3 words froze me. Whoever this was knew exactly what was happening. They knew my son had been here the night before. They knew he'd demanded money. They knew he was supposed to return this morning. I wrote back. "Who is this? What do you want?" The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally the reply came. "He deserves the truth. You know that." Before I could respond, another message followed. "If you won't tell him, I will." I showed it to my wife. She grabbed my arm, gripping harder than I expected, and said, "Someone's messing with us." I agreed. But the problem wasn't that someone was messing with us. The problem was that someone out there believed there was a truth to tell. Something we had hidden, something that involved my father, my son, and now, me's. I texted back. "Tell him what? What truth?" No reply. I tried calling the number. It rang once. Then it cut off, blocked. My wife said we should call the police again. Not to report a crime, but to ask for help finding our son. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was our son, a single message. "I'm coming over. Don't lie to me again." My wife looked at me, terrified. I looked at the envelope on the table, still open, still holding that message from my father that I didn't understand. Then I heard his car pull into the driveway, and the look on his face when he walked through the door. That was when I realized this wasn't about money at all. It was about something he believed I'd done. Something he believed for a very long time. He didn't slam the door when he came in. That was the first thing I noticed. My son never handled anger quietly. Not when he was younger, not in his teenage years, not even during the first months of his separation. But that morning, he walked inside with a calmness that scared me far more than shouting ever could. My wife whispered his name, but he didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on me, not furious, not confused, just decided, like he'd already made up his mind before stepping inside and nothing I could say would change it, he said. "Where is it?" I asked. "Where is what?" He held out his hand. "The letter, the one Grandpa left." I didn't ask how he knew about it. I didn't ask who told him. I just handed it to him. He unfolded it, read the sentence once, then again. When he lifted his head, his voice cracked, just slightly. "So it's true." My wife stepped forward. "What's true? What are you talking about?" He ignored her question. He looked straight at me and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I told him I didn't even understand what this letter meant, that it had arrived that morning from a man I'd never met. My son didn't react. He just kept staring at the paper. He whispered, 28 years, you let me believe something that wasn't real for 28 years. My wife covered her mouth. What wasn't real? My son finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes when he did, it nearly dropped me to my knees. He said, "Mom, he isn't my father." My wife gasped. I couldn't breathe. My first instinct was to deny it because it was absurd. Completely out of nowhere, I said. "That's not true. Where did you get that idea? Who told you that?" My son shook his head slowly, like he was disappointed in me. Please don't do that." "Not again." I turned to my wife, and she looked as shocked as I was. She whispered, "Honey, what in where would you even hear such a thing?" He folded the letter back up, "From Mom. Last month. You told me everything." Elaine broke. Not crying, just breaking. I swear to you, I never said anything like that. Why would I say something so horrible?" My son didn't argue with her. That was the strange part. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't accusing. He said everything like it was a settled fact. "You don't remember," he said. "You've been forgetting things for months." My wife shook her head violently. "Not that. I would never forget saying something like that." He turned to me. "So you're still lying." "I've never lied to you about anything," I said. He laughed once. A bitter, quiet sound. "You lied every day of my life." My wife grabbed his arm. "Stop. Don't talk like that. Your father has been nothing but good to you. Nothing but loyal. Nothing but honest." He pulled his arm away gently. Not harshly. Not angrily. Just like it hurt him to do it. He raised me. "Yes, but that's not the same thing." I stepped closer. "Who told you I'm not your father? Give me a name." He hesitated. A long hesitation, the kind that meant he was weighing whether to reveal something or not. Then he said, "It wasn't one person. It was all the pieces. The stories that didn't match. The things Mom said when she thought I wasn't listening. The things Grandpa wrote." "My father never wrote anything about that," I said. "You sure?" he asked quietly. I felt something twist in my chest, because the way he said, "You sure?" that tone meant he had something. Something he wasn't showing yet. I asked him what he meant. He took a breath and said, "Grandpa wrote me letters too." My wife's hand slipped off the back of the chair. She whispered, "Letters? What letters?" He nodded. "A box of them. I thought they were just old stories. Memories, stuff he wanted me to read when I got older. He wrote a lot about family, loyalty, blood." He paused. I didn't understand any of it until last night. My heart dropped. "Where did you get these letters?" "From someone who kept them safe," he said. "Who?" "I'm not telling you," he said. "Not until you tell me the truth." My wife reached toward him again. Sweetheart, listen to me. Your father is your father. Don't let anyone put these ideas in your head, he whispered. Mom, please, stop. Then he looked at me again. Why would Grandpa write, if he ever asks? Tell him the truth, unless there was a truth you were hiding. I told him I didn't know why my father wrote that I was just as confused as he was. He didn't believe me. I could see it on his face. Something had already convinced him. Something heavy. Something important. Something he'd been carrying. Maybe for months. I asked him to bring the letters so we could read them together. He said maybe later. He kept the envelope in his hand. He stared at it like it had confirmed everything he needed. My wife kept whispering, "This is a mistake. This is a misunderstanding. You're being manipulated." My son finally sat down, slowly, almost reluctantly. And in a quiet voice he said, "I didn't come here to fight. I came to give you a chance." "A chance for what?" I asked. "To admit it." I sat down across from him. "Admit what?" He met my eyes directly, and when he did, tears welled up in his. "That I was never yours." My wife burst into tears. "Stop it. Please." He didn't look at her again. I leaned in. "I raised you from the day you were born. I held you the moment they brought you out. I fed you. I rocked you to sleep every night. I taught you how to walk, how to read, how to ride a bike. Don't you dare tell me I'm not your father." He wiped his face, looked away, then said quietly, "Then prove it." Silence. My wife whispered, "How? How would he prove?" My son cut her off. "A DNA test." My wife's breath caught. I felt something inside me shift, not because I feared the result, but because I knew what asking for a test meant. It meant he didn't trust us. It meant someone had gotten to him. It meant someone had convinced him of something so deeply that he was willing to tear apart everything we'd built. I asked, "If I take the test, and it shows what I already know, that I am your father, will you believe me?" He hesitated again. A longer hesitation this time. Then he whispered, "I don't know." My wife broke down. She said, "What happened to you? What changed? Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer. I said, "Tell me who told you these things." He finally looked at me again. "You'll find out soon enough." I told him he needed to stay and talk. He said he couldn't. He said he'd be back tomorrow. With the letters, he said, and everything else. My wife begged him not to leave. He hugged her quick, tight, but not me. Then before walking out, he said one more thing. "Dad, if you're lying, tomorrow will destroy you." The door closed, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of my own son, not because he was dangerous, but because something had been planted in him so deeply that he couldn't see us anymore. But what he brought the next day, that was the moment everything shattered. He came back the next morning exactly when he said he would. 9 o'clock. Not a minute early, not a minute late. He walked in without knocking, holding a cardboard box pressed against his chest like it weighed more than it physically could. He didn't greet us. He didn't look around. He went straight to the table, set the box down, and said, "I want you to look at all of this before you say another word." My wife whispered his name, but he didn't react. I asked him, "What's in the box?" He said, "Proof." I reached for it, but he pulled it back slightly. "Read it in order," he said. Then he opened the lid and took out a stack of envelopes, rubber banded together. They were old. The paper wasn't yellowed, but the edges were soft, worn. My son held them like they were something sacred. "Grandpa wrote these?" I asked. He nodded. I didn't read them all when I got them. I thought it was just memories, stories, advice, stuff meant for when I was older. My wife asked, "When did you get them?" He didn't answer that. He handed me the first letter. "Read it out loud," he said. I looked at my wife. She nodded. So I opened the envelope. The letter was dated 28 years ago. A few months before my son was born. The handwriting was my father's, the same firm strokes, the same tight spacing, the same way he formed the letter R, like it was leaning forward. The letter wasn't long. It said, "Your family is growing and that is good, but you must be honest with the boy when the time comes. He will feel the truth, even if you hide it." My wife grabbed my arm. "What truth? What is he talking about?" I shook my head. "I don't know." My son pulled out another letter. "Read this one." This one was dated 2 years after the first. It said, "Secrets rot families. Don't make the same mistakes others made." My son crossed his arms, as if that confirmed everything. "So, are you ready to talk yet?" I set the letters down. "These don't say anything about you not being my son." He leaned in. "Because you haven't read all of them." I told him to hand me the rest. He shook his head. "No, this is where you talk. Tell me what he meant." My wife stepped closer to him, wiping her eyes. "Sweetheart, listen to me. Your grandfather loved you. He adored you. He would never create this kind of confusion. Someone must have changed these, or forged something, or he cut her off. Stop, please. I know you're trying to help, but every time you say you don't remember telling me, it just makes me feel worse." My wife almost collapsed into the chair. "I didn't tell you that," she whispered. "I would remember." My son looked at her with something soft in his eyes, something protective. "Mom, you don't remember a lot of things anymore." She shook her head hard. "Not this. Never this," I said again. "Tell us who gave you the letters," he said. "Someone who knew the truth." I told him. There was no truth to tell. He stared at me in silence for a long moment before saying, "Fine, then I'll show you the one that made it all make sense." He reached into the box again and pulled out a single envelope. It was thicker than the others, sealed with tape that looked new. When he opened it, he took out a folded sheet and placed it in front of me. "Read it," he said. "This letter was dated 7 months before my father died. It said, 'If he ever learns the truth, it won't be from me. But I beg you, don't let him find out from strangers. Tell him yourself. Blood deserves honesty.'" My wife burst into tears again. I closed my eyes for a moment. "This still doesn't say what you think it says." My son leaned forward. "Dad, Grandpa wrote blood." "Why would he write that, if he wasn't talking about this?" I told him I didn't know why my father wrote that word. He said, "You do know. You just won't admit it." I opened my mouth, but he wasn't finished. He said, "There's more. Something you didn't mention. Something she told me that night." "What did she say?" I asked. He looked at my wife again. "You told me there was another man." My wife shook her head so fast, I thought she'd hurt herself. "No, no, I never said that." "I swear to you, you did," he insisted. "You said his name started with an R. You said Dad forgave you but told you never to speak of it again." My wife covered her face with both hands. "That never happened. I would never say something like that. I never cheated on your father. Not ever. Not once." My son looked at me, and in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. He believed her. He believed she had said it. He believed she had confessed to something she didn't do. He believed that my silence meant guilt. I said, "Son, listen to me. Your mother did not say that. Someone made you think she did." He shook his head. "She was crying when she said it. She was confused. But she said the words. I didn't want to believe them until I found these letters." I said, "Then why didn't she remember?" He didn't answer. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Because her memory is slipping. It's not her fault. She mixes things up sometimes. But she would never invent a story like this on purpose." My wife whispered, "Why are you doing this to us?" My son looked down. "Because I deserve to know where I came from." "And you do," I said. "From us. From me." He squeezed his eyes shut, as if fighting something internally. "I need proof, Dad. I'm sorry, but I need proof." I asked him again, "Who gave you these letters?" He finally said, quietly, Someone who knew Grandpa better than you did. That didn't make sense. My father and I were close. Extremely close. There wasn't anyone who knew him better than I did. Unless we were talking about someone from before I was born. Someone from his past. Someone I never met. I asked, "What's their name?" He shook his head. She said, "You'd react just like this." "She?" I repeated. My son nodded once. I felt a cold certainty settle into my chest. "Who is she?" I asked. Again, he hesitated. Then he whispered her name, a name I hadn't heard in over 30 years. A name my father never wanted spoken in the house again. A name tied to the darkest chapter of our family. Ruth. My wife looked at me, confused. "Who's Ruth?" I didn't answer. My son leaned back. "She has all the answers." He reached into the box again. This time, he pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table toward me. When I saw who was in it, my father and Ruth, holding a baby that wasn't me, my entire body went numb. I didn't touch the photograph at first. I just stared at it, unable to breathe. My father looked younger than I ever remembered. Hair darker, face fuller, and next to him was Ruth, smiling the way someone smiles when they believes they've won something. In her arms was a newborn. Not me. A child I had never seen before. My wife whispered, "Whose baby is that?" My son answered before I could. She said it was me. My wife gasped. I said quietly, "That's impossible." He pushed the photo closer. "She told me Grandpa demanded she give me up, that he told her the baby, me, needed a proper home. She said he begged you to raise me as your own, because she wasn't fit." My wife wiped her cheeks again, exhausted from all the crying. "Sweetheart, listen to me. This woman is lying. She didn't seem like a liar to me," he said. "She told me things about Grandpa. Specific things. Things she couldn't have known unless she was close to him." I said, "What things?" He hesitated. "She told me about his heart condition before he ever told you. She knew the name of the doctor he went to. She knew about the loan he took out when you were a kid. She said she helped him sign the paperwork." My jaw tightened. "She knew those things because she used to be his accountant. That's all." My son shook his head. "She said that was the story he told everyone, but she said there was more." "A lot more," my wife whispered. "Why now?" My son answered, "Because she said she promised Grandpa she'd stay quiet until he died." That hit me like a punch. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my son. Really looked at him. Blood race. So tense, so hurt, so desperate for something to make sense. Reminded me of how he looked when he broke his arm at age 10, and tried not to cry. He wanted the pain to stop but didn't know how to ask. I said, "Look at me. You are my son, that's the truth." He swallowed hard. "Then prove it." My wife reached for him. "You don't need proof. You just need to trust us." He pulled his hand away gently, not in anger, but in fear. "I want to. I really do. But everything is upside down right now." I asked, again, "Why were you with Ruth in the first place? Who took you to her? How did you even find her?" He hesitated. Then he said a sentence that terrified me more than anything else in the last 48 hours. "She found me." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" She called me, out of the blue, said she'd been waiting for the right time. She said she had something that belonged to me. He lifted the box slightly. "The letters, the photo, more stuff in here," my wife whispered again. "She's manipulating you." He shook his head. "She didn't ask for anything. She didn't want money. She didn't want attention. She said she just wanted me to know the truth. People like Ruth," I said softly, "never want nothing." He looked uncertain for the first time. "Dad, who is she, really?" I pressed my fingers together and exhaled slowly. My wife waited. My son waited. And for the first time in decades I realized I would have to say a name I vowed never to speak again. Ruth was my father's mistake. My son narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? It means, I said, she created chaos wherever she went. She hurt people. She broke families. She liked being close to power, money, attention, anything she could use to make herself feel important. My wife asked, "What did she do?" I looked at her. "Everything you can imagine," then back at my son, "and a few things you can't." He didn't speak. He waited for me to continue. I said, "When I was around 25, my father cut contact with her completely. She had lied to him, used him, cost him thousands of dollars. She tried to claim things that weren't hers. She tried to take things from people." My son said, "Take what?" "Their peace," I said. "Their trust, their stability." My wife whispered, "Their children," I said. "No, not that. She never had a child. At least not one that she kept." My son stared at me, hard. "So you're saying she made all of this up?" "Yes," I said. "Because she needs an audience. She needs someone to believe her, to listen to her, to make her feel powerful again." He looked at the box. "Then what about the letters? She probably stole them," I said. "My father kept every scrap of paper he ever wrote. She would have had access to his filing cabinets before he cut her off." He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. My wife stood up, walked to the counter, and came back with a small notebook in her hand. She placed it on the table. It was my father's handwriting on the front. My son said, "What's that?" "His journal," my wife said. "The one he gave us the year before he died. The one he told us to keep safe." My son leaned forward. My wife opened it gently, flipping through pages, stopping at one. "Read this," she said. I handed it to my son. He read silently. His eyes moved slowly, then froze. He reread the line, then reread it again. Finally, he whispered it aloud. "She tried to claim a child that wasn't hers after losing her job. I told her never to contact my family again." My wife touched his arm. "Do you hear that? Your grandfather wrote that years before you were even an idea." He stared at the page. His hands trembled. He whispered, "But why did she tell me I was hers?" I said, "Because she's lonely, because she wants to rewrite her past, because she thinks if she attaches herself to you, she gets a connection she never earned." He shut the journal and leaned back, overwhelmed. "This is too much. All of it." I nodded. "I know." Then he said something I didn't expect. "I want to talk to her again." My wife gasped. "No," I said. "Son, why?" He rubbed his forehead. "Because I need to hear her say it. I need to hear her admit she lied." "She won't admit it," I said. "She's incapable of that." "Then I want to see how she reacts," he said. "I want to see how the pieces fit." My wife shook her head, terrified. "She will twist you up again." He looked at me. "I want you there, both of you." "Where?" I asked. He hesitated. "She asked me to meet her on Saturday. She said she has something else I need to see." Something in my stomach tightened. "What something?" She didn't say. My wife pressed her hands together. "Honey, please, don't meet her." My son looked at her with pain in his eyes. "Mom, I have to." He turned back to me. "Will you come with me?" I stared at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Yes." But inside, a fear I hadn't felt since my father's funeral crept up my spine, because if Ruth had something else, then she wasn't done with us. Saturday came faster than I wanted. My wife barely slept the night before. She kept getting up, pacing the hallway, whispering prayers under her breath. By morning her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't pour her own cereal. I had to do it for her. She kept saying, "This isn't good. Something's wrong." "I feel it." I didn't argue. I felt it too. My son arrived at 10 sharp, the same way he had all week, rigid posture, tense jaw, eyes that wouldn't fully meet mine. He said, "She's expecting us at 11. My wife whispered, "Do we really have to go through with this?" My son nodded. "I need clarity. I need this done." I put my hand on his shoulder. "We're going, but listen carefully. We don't agree to anything. We don't sign anything. We don't give her anything. We stay together the entire time." He nodded. "Fine." The drive over was quiet. Too quiet. My wife sat in the back seat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her thumb rubbing over her wedding ring again and again. My son stared straight ahead, not moving. I kept glancing at him. I wanted to say something comforting, something fatherly, but nothing came. Everything felt fragile. When we parked outside the place she had chosen, a small old brick building on the corner of a narrow street, my wife whispered, "Why here?" my son said. She said, "It's where she volunteers." I said, "She doesn't volunteer anywhere." My son frowned. "What do you mean?" I said. "She's always used that word when she wants to seem respectable. Trust me. She's not helping anyone." He didn't reply. We walked inside. There was a front room with a couple of tables and boxes stacked around, but no staff, no activity, nothing that suggested anyone actually worked there. My wife whispered, "This isn't a volunteer place." I said nothing. My son swallowed hard and said, "She told me to meet her in the back." Before we moved, I touched his arm. "Son, before we go in there, I need you to understand something. Your grandfather cut her out for a reason. She wasn't just dramatic, she was dangerous." He looked at me. Dangerous. How? She knew how to turn people against each other. She knew how to make families question themselves. It gave her power. She enjoyed it. He didn't answer. He just stepped forward. I exchanged a look with my wife, and followed him down a short hallway. At the end was a small office. The door was half open. My son pushed it gently. Ruth was sitting behind a desk, hands folded neatly, as if she'd been waiting her entire life for this exact moment. She was older than I remembered. Thinner hair, deeper lines, but the expression was the same. A smile that didn't belong to someone who cared. A smile that belonged to someone who enjoyed watching people unravel. "There you are," she said softly. "I knew you'd come." My wife stiffened behind me. My son stepped inside. "I want answers." Ruth nodded. "Of course." Her voice made my skin crawl. Soft. Too soft. She always spoke like she knew something no one else did. She gestured toward 3 chairs. "Sit, please." My wife said, "I'll stand." Ruth shrugged. "Suit yourself." I said nothing, and sat beside my son. Ruth looked directly at him. "I imagine this week has been difficult." He nodded. "Just tell me why you said I was yours." She smiled gently. "Because it's the truth." I slammed my hand on the table. "Stop lying." She didn't flinch. She didn't look at me. She kept her gaze on my son. "Sweetheart, he's scared. He always has been. Your father has lived his whole life afraid that you would learn where you truly came from." My son clenched his jaw. "If that's true, then show me something that actually proves it." Ruth opened a drawer and pulled out another envelope. "I thought you might ask for this." My wife whispered. "No." I said, "Don't touch that." My son said, "Give it to me." Ruth handed it over like it was a sacred relic. My son opened it. Inside was a birth certificate. My wife gasped. My son froze. I stood up instantly. "That's fake," Ruth said. "Your father always denied what he couldn't face." I grabbed the paper, held it up. "There is no hospital in the state with this name. It closed in the 70s, and every birth certificate from that era had different formatting. This is a forgery." Ruth smiled. "You always were observant." "Unfortunately not observant enough 28 years ago." My wife stepped closer. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from him?" Ruth leaned back. "I want him to know the truth." I said, "The truth according to you." She finally looked at me. "You think your father didn't tell me things? You think he didn't confide in me? We were closer than you ever understood." I shook my head. You were closer to his checkbook. She smiled again. Believe what you want. He told me things he never told his family. My son said. Like what? She said. Like why? He begged your father to raise you. My wife shook her head violently. This is cruel, Ruth said calmly. No, this is necessary. Then she said something that chilled the room. He told me he was afraid of what she might do if she kept the baby. My wife looked up sharply. Me? Ruth said. Yes. My wife staggered back as if she'd been hit. Why would he say that? Ruth folded her hands. Because he knew you were overwhelmed. He knew you were struggling mentally at the time. My wife grabbed my arm. That never happened. I said, Ruth, stop this. Ruth continued, unfazed. Your father told me she couldn't handle the pregnancy, that she had episodes, that she begged him for help. My wife started shaking her head, again and again. That's a lie. My son looked torn, completely torn. Mom, did you ever? My wife burst into tears. No, never, not once. That woman is lying. I turned to my son. Listen to me. She's doing exactly what she did to my father. Twisting things, building stories, making you doubt the people who love you most. My son ran his hands through his hair. Overwhelmed. I just want clarity. I said, then we leave, right now. We leave and we get a real DNA test. Not a word from her. Not another second of this manipulation, Ruth said quietly. He won't do that. He's afraid of what it will show, I snapped. Stop speaking for me. She leaned back, satisfied. You always told your father not to trust me. But he did. More than he trusted you. My son asked. Why did you wait until now to say anything? Why this week? Ruth looked at him with a softness. I didn't believe for a second. Because I'm dying. My wife gasped. My son froze. I stared at her. She said, the doctors told me last month. I don't have long. And I couldn't leave this world, knowing you never knew the truth. I didn't believe a word of it. But my son did. I could see it in his eyes. Something inside him softened. Something dangerous. I said, son, don't fall for this. Everything she's said so far is a lie. Ruth reached into the drawer again and placed another envelope on the table, larger this time. She said, your grandfather left this for you. He told me to give it to you when the time was right. I felt a drop of cold spread through my chest. My son looked at me. Dad, is that true? I said, no, absolutely not. Ruth pushed the envelope closer. Open it. He reached for it. I grabbed his wrist. Don't. He looked at me. Then he looked at her. Then back at the envelope. His voice cracked when he said it. I have to know. And before I could stop him, he tore it open. The room went silent when he tore the envelope open. Even Ruth stopped smiling for a moment, as if she knew whatever happened next couldn't be undone. My son unfolded the papers slowly, almost cautiously. His eyes scanned the first page, and immediately his face tightened with confusion. My wife whispered, what is it? He didn't answer. He kept reading, flipping to the next sheet. His breathing changed quicker, sharper. I leaned forward. What does it say? He shook his head slightly, like he couldn't make sense of it. It's a statement. I frowned. What kind of statement? He held up a page. Signed by Grandpa. Ruth interjected softly. Yes, the truth he never wanted anyone else to control. I reached out. Let me see it. My son pulled it close to his chest. Not yet. I stared at him. I'm your father. He looked at me. Pain stretching across his face. That's the part I'm trying to understand. My wife sobbed quietly behind me. My son read again, slower this time. Then he whispered aloud, I, Harold Miller, declare that in the year 1995, I made a decision that has weighed on me every day since. I closed my eyes. Ruth watched me with satisfaction. My wife whispered, That doesn't mean anything. Anyone could have written that. My son continued reading silently, then said aloud, I feared the consequences of the truth. I feared what it would do to my family, so I kept the secret with Ruth, as she was the only one who knew the full story. He stopped reading and stared at the paper, stunned. I stood up. Let me see it now. He didn't hand it over. Dad, just wait. No, I said firmly, my voice louder than I intended. I will not let her twist his memory. Ruth spoke calmly, like someone reciting a bedtime story. He told me you'd react like this. Your father always had a temper. My father, I said, had patience you never deserved. She smiled thinly. Denial suits you. My wife reached for the paper. Honey, please, let us read it. My son hesitated before finally passing it to her. She held it like it was a burning coal, and scanned it quickly, eyes darting, lips trembling. After a few seconds, she whispered, This is doctored. I know your father's handwriting. The signature is copied from the life insurance file. I recognize it. I turned to Ruth. You forged this. She simply adjusted her sleeve. Believe what you want. The truth remains. My son looked shaken. Show me proof it's fake. My wife pointed at the bottom corner. See that flourished loop on the HA? He didn't start doing that until 2006. This document is dated 1995. It's a mismatch. Someone tried to imitate his style and didn't know the timeline. My son stared at the corner. His brow furrowed. He looked up at Ruth. Is that true? Ruth's expression twitched, barely. But it did. People's handwriting changes gradually. Nothing is exact. I stepped forward. Not gradually, and not backward. Whoever wrote that signature studied the newer version. My son looked from the document to Ruth and back again. The seeds of doubt were finally shifting. Slowly but shifting, he asked her directly, Why would Grandpa ask you to hold this for almost 30 years? Ruth folded her hands. Because he trusted me. I couldn't help it. I laughed once bitterly. He trusted you, you who stole from him, who drained his accounts, who made him hide his checkbook every time you visited. She turned her head sharply toward me. I paid back what I owed. My wife shook her head. Only after he threatened to press charges. My son looked more confused now, more torn. Ruth, you didn't tell me any of that. She leaned toward him slightly, softening her voice. Because it wasn't relevant to your story. My son stared at her. My story, or yours. She sat back, eyes narrowing. You think they're telling you the truth? You think they haven't lied to you your entire life? I said. The only person lying here is you. She ignored me and spoke directly to my son. You deserve the truth. You deserve to know who you are, he whispered. I know who I am. Ruth's voice sharpened. Do you? My son pressed both hands to his forehead. Stop. Just stop. He looked at me. Dad, I'm not saying I believe her. I'm saying everything is a mess, and I don't know what's real anymore. I knelt in front of him. Look at me. He did, eyes glistening, full of fear and conflict. I said, if there was anything at all that made you not my son, I would have told you. Not because I wanted to, but because I would have owed you that truth. He swallowed hard. My wife placed her hand on his back. You are ours. You have always been ours. Ruth tapped her nails lightly on the desk, amused. People say anything when they're scared. I turned to her sharply. What do you want, Ruth? Money? Attention? A place in his life? What is it? Because none of this is about him. It's about you. She smiled thinly. You always did misunderstand me. My son stood abruptly. Enough. I'm done listening to both sides. I want a real answer. Something neither of you can twist. I nodded. Good. Then we get a DNA test, my wife whispered, relieved. Yes. But Ruth spoke over us. A test won't tell you what really matters. My son looked at her. It will tell me who my father is. She shook her head slowly. No. It will tell you who your biological father is. But that's not the same thing. I felt a chill run down my spine. My son said quietly, "What are you implying now?" Ruth stood up slowly. She reached into a lower drawer, pulled out a sealed plastic bag. Inside it was something I didn't expect. A photograph. Old, worn. My father on one side, Ruth on the other. And between them, another man. A man I recognized. A man from my father's past. A man who disappeared from our lives abruptly. Decades ago. Ruth tapped the bag. "This," she said, "is who you should be asking about." My wife whispered, terrified, "Who is that?" My son looked at me, waiting. I stared at the photograph, my stomach turning, because the man in the picture, the man standing with my father and Ruth, was someone I prayed my son would never have to hear about. Someone tied to a shameful chapter. My father buried deep. Someone who once tore our family apart before. His name rested on my tongue like a stone. And when I finally said it, my son's face drained of color. I swallowed hard and forced the words out. "It's Robert. Robert Hendricks." My son froze completely. His face went pale, hands gripping the edge of the desk. "That's him?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. "The man your grandfather tried to keep you away from." Ruth leaned forward, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Now you understand. He wanted you to know the truth someday, but not yet. He knew it could destroy your family." I snapped, voice shaking. "Destroy us? You've already done enough." She ignored me. "The DNA test? It won't answer the questions you need answered. The real story is here," she said, tapping the photograph. "It's about bloodlines, secrets, decisions that shaped your entire life before you were even born." My wife whispered urgently, "Honey, don't listen to her. She's manipulating you. She always has." My son looked between us, torn. "Dad, Mom, I don't know what to believe anymore." I stepped closer to him. "Listen to me. You are my son. You've always been my son. You've always been my son. Everything else is a distraction. A story she's spun to make herself feel powerful." He shook his head slightly. "But Grandpa wrote letters. Ruth has proof." I raised my voice, almost shouting. "That proof is forged. Every single word she's twisted to serve her agenda. Do you understand that?" He hesitated, his eyes filled with confusion and doubt. I want to believe you. I really do." My wife touched his arm. "You have to trust what you've known all your life. Your father raised you, loved you, protected you. That hasn't changed." He looked at the photograph again, then at Ruth. "Why now? Why after all these years?" She leaned back, voice soft but icy. "Because your grandfather is gone. And I wanted him to rest knowing the truth has reached you. He trusted me to do it right." I took a deep breath. "No, you didn't do it right. You've caused months of doubt, fear, and confusion. You've almost destroyed what matters most." Ruth tilted her head. "Do you think your father's decisions were perfect? Do you think he never hurt anyone? He made choices to protect you, to save your family from scandals you can't even comprehend," I said sharply. "That's irrelevant now. He's dead, and this charade. It ends today." My son looked at me, tears welling. "Dad, I have to know. I need the truth about Robert. Was he my father?" I froze, my mind raced. This was the moment of reckoning. If I said yes, I'd open a door I didn't want opened. If I said no, he might never forgive the doubt I hadn't been able to prevent. I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "No, Robert Hendricks is not your father. He never was. Your father is me. Always has been, always will be." Ruth's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "You're certain?" "Yes," I said firmly. Completely certain. You want proof? DNA test. Do it now. But until then, stop poisoning his mind. My son stared at us both, gripping the edge of the desk. He was shaking, torn between trust and suspicion. I don't know if I can believe anyone anymore. I knelt in front of him, took his hands in mine. You can believe me. Look at me. I am your father. I raised you. I loved you. Everything else is just noise. He exhaled slowly, as if releasing months of tension. I need time. I nodded. Take it. But know this, nothing will ever change the fact that you are my son. That will never change. Ruth stood up, realizing she had lost control. This isn't over, she said. He will come back. He will question everything again, I said calmly. No, he won't. Not after today. You've done enough damage. Leave, my son finally spoke. Voice quiet but resolute. Ruth, go, now. She hesitated, then turned and left without another word. The room fell silent. My wife sank into the chair, exhausted. My son sat back, staring at the table. Trembling, I placed my hand on his shoulder. Son, it's over. You're safe. You're ours. Nothing she says or does can change that. He looked up at me, eyes full of emotion. I don't know how to feel. Relief, fear, anger. I nodded. It's okay. All of it is okay. You just need to breathe. My wife reached over and took both our hands. We're together. That's all that matters. He finally exhaled a long, shaky breath. I think I'm starting to understand. Everything was a test, a game, to see if I would question the people who love me most. I said softly. Exactly. And you passed. You chose us. He nodded, tears falling freely now. I don't want to think about her anymore, I said firmly. You don't have to. She's gone. This chapter ends today. He looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. Dad, can we just be a family again? I smiled, voice cracking slightly. Yes, absolutely. That's all we need to be. My wife hugged both of us. My son buried his face in my chest. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace, but even as relief settled over us, I knew one thing. Ruth's influence might be gone for now, but the questions she planted, the doubts, the fear, those would take time to heal, and the real test, making sure my son never doubted the truth again, because in the end, trust once broken is harder to rebuild than any secret she could ever keep. And I promised myself, silently, I would never let anyone come between us again. The house was quiet the next morning, the kind of quiet that makes you wonder if everything that happened the night before was just a dream. My wife was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a cup she wasn't drinking from. My son walked in a few minutes later, eyes tired, jaw tight, like he'd barely slept. He sat down across from me and spoke with a voice calmer than I expected. Dad, I've been thinking. I braced myself. Okay, he took a long breath. I don't want to live my life in the shadow of someone else's choices anymore. Not Ruth's, not Grandpa's, not anyone's. I want the truth, but I also want peace. I'm tired of being pulled between stories I didn't ask for. I nodded slowly. You deserve peace. You deserve clarity. He looked down at his hands. I scheduled the DNA test. Today, I need to do it for myself. Not because I doubt you, but because I can't carry this weight any longer. I felt a pinch in my chest, but I didn't argue. Then I'll go with you. He hesitated. I was hoping you would say that. My wife placed her hand on his arm. Whatever the outcome is, we face it together. His voice cracked. I know. For a moment, none of us spoke. It felt like all the months of tension were coming down to this single moment, one decision that could either destroy everything or rebuild what we thought couldn't be saved. Finally he stood. Let's go. The ride was quiet. No music, no talking. Just breathing, and thoughts none of us dared to speak out loud. When we arrived, he looked at me before we went inside. "Dad, if something unexpected happens, if the test says something I don't want to see, I want you to know something." I turned to him, heart pounding. "What? You're still my father? That won't change. You raised me. You taught me everything I know. That won't be erased by a piece of paper." I felt something in me break, something heavy I'd been carrying since the day Ruth poisoned his mind. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't know how much I needed to hear that." He gave me a shaky smile. "Let's get this over with." It didn't take long. A few signatures, a quick swab, instructions for results. No dramatic moment, just a quiet procedure that held the weight of a lifetime. When we walked back out, he let out a breath he'd been holding. "Okay," he said. "It's done." But the real moment came later, back at home. A knock on the door, 2 envelopes, one for him, one for me. He stared at his envelope like it was something dangerous. "Dad, will you open yours first?" "Are you sure?" He nodded, voice trembling. "Yes." My hands felt heavy as I tore it open. The paper shook in my fingers. I unfolded it slowly, letting my eyes find the line that mattered most. The line that would decide everything. I stared at it. Then I looked up at him. He swallowed hard. "Dad, what does it say?" I held the paper out to him, my voice low and steady. "Read it." He took it with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the words. Then his shoulders dropped, his mouth falling open slightly, as if he had forgotten how to breathe. "It says, 'You're my father,'" he whispered. "It says it clearly. You're my biological father." My wife covered her mouth, tears falling instantly. I felt a rush of relief so strong it nearly knocked me to my knees. My son leaned forward, holding his head in his hands, letting out a sound that was half laughter, half sob. "Dad, I am so sorry. I doubted you. I let her get inside my head. I let her make me question everything." I moved closer and put my hand on his shoulder. "No, don't apologize. You were lost, and she was good at what she did. Too good." He wiped his face. "I thought I'd broken everything. I thought I'd ruined our family." My voice cracked. "You didn't ruin anything. We just went through hell together. And we came out on the other side." He stood suddenly and pulled me into a hug so tight I could feel the months of fear and guilt leaving his body. "You're my dad," he whispered again. "You always were. You always will be." I held him, unable to speak. My wife joined us, her arms wrapping around both of us. For the first time in what felt like years, the three of us stood together without doubt, without fear, without anyone pulling us apart. After a long moment, he stepped back and wiped his eyes. "So what now? What happens next?" I looked at him, then at my wife, then back at him. "Now, we heal. We rebuild. We forgive. And we move forward." He nodded slowly. "I want that more than anything." I hesitated before saying the next words, but I knew they needed to be said. "And Ruth?" His expression hardened. "She never gets near this family again." My wife spoke softly but firmly. "Agreed." He took a deep breath. "Dad, today was the first time in months I felt like myself again. I'm done letting someone else write my story." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Good. Because your story is ours too, and it always will be." He gave me a small smile. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I never would have," I said. "Not in a million years." He nodded and looked around the room with a calmness I hadn't seen in him since before all this began. "Feels different now," he said quietly. "Lighter." My wife reached for his hand. "That's what truth does, and family," I added. He smiled. A real smile, the kind I thought I'd never see again. "Yeah, family." And for the first time since that morning he shouted, "You owe me." I felt the ground settle beneath my feet, not because a test told us what we already knew, But because he believed it again, because he came home, because we got our son back.